Find it sleeping in its nest before it wakes up. Touch it gently, you want it feeling completely calm, so you can hold it in your palm and help it grow just like it was born to be. Come.
Welcome to 111 Life. We will get back to you with your questions and answers. Bear with us. Thank you for subscribing. We are really excited. This is our second episode, and we were talking about past life in the previous episode, but we still want to carry on a little bit around that and a little bit around experiences that may not just be through regression, but just through an experience. But we're going to start off with Josie, because when Josie went under regression and had a past life experience, there was so much more to it, and we're so intrigued and we want to talk about it. So carry on, Josie. Let's talk about a little bit more about this regression, and then we're going to have a look at it in a more sort of like astrological way.
Okay, so basically within this regression there was a lot in it. I was probably under for about 4 hours, so you can so you can imagine all that was in it. I actually still have the recording of it and the transcript of it. I did have a break in between, Gaynor, because I can see you're looking shocked.
Yeah.
But I also went for a wee when I was still like, and it felt like I was in a dream. It was really strange. So basically, after she had taken me through that life, we went into one, and at the time I was quite interested in aliens and ETs, because that was a lot what Dolores Cannon's
I'm not allowed to
about.
talk about them, excuse me.
We will talk about them later.
Yeah, this, I'm not saying, this is the thing, where it was regression, it's not me saying like, oh, this was definitely real, this is definitely it, but this is just what came up for me. Because I think one of the questions I had was, did I have lives on other planets, other galaxies? And I can't tell you if this was past, present, or future. I assume there's no time in the galaxy. I don't know. However, she took me under, and this was quite near the end. She'd been asking me all these questions, and she asked the one about had I had other lives, and then I saw myself, but it wasn't me. It was like a being, but like I can't even describe it. Do you know what I mean? I cannot describe what I was. I have it on the transcript somewhere. I have to dig them out. However, I was somewhere, I don't know what it was. It wasn't Earth. It wasn't a physical sort of plane. And there was 2 aliens, or what I would call an alien because we're humans. And they were each next to me. They were quite small. And we were looking at a hologram of like the world. And I don't know exactly what we were doing, but we were planning something. We had some sort of plan for humanity, for the universe. And I'd have to dig out the transcripts, like I've said, to get some more information on exactly what that was. But that really stuck with me. I don't have much more explanation on that because I have no clue what it was. But that was just something that came up.
Well, I need to interrupt here because behind the scenes, this subject I really, really wanted to sort of bring in maybe later on. Unfortunately, it's not. It's come out today. And as we're talking about ETs, I think if you're going to read anything, it's definitely got to be Mum's book, because that also covers an experience that she had. And that is also about UFOs or an ET. Again, this is a subject I am sure that people love to get involved in. So if you think that you've had an experience or seen an ET or believe in them or don't believe in them, we would love to hear from you. And if you've had any experiences around that, I will then hand that over to my mum to chat with you about.
I've had many experiences, so that's another day.
Just sort of like talking about the regression, and you sort of like talking about that that's quite an out of the world experience, and we're going to park that because that is going to be a subject that we are going to explore a little bit more down the line. Seriously, we really are. What I liked about the last episode was you sort of like looked into the chart and was saying about the South Node, showing you really what skills you're coming in with, you know, really suggesting your past life, you're bringing over these new skills. With regards to Mum's book and her experience, did you see that in her chart? Because you've read so much of her chart. I mean, how would that show in her chart?
So, knowing what I know about Gaynor's past life, obviously I don't know a whole lot because she's kept it for when I read the book. However, I think the thing that jumps out to me the most about looking at Gaynor's South Node, and the last episode, I didn't really go into any aspects to it because I feel like I don't want to overwhelm people who are new to astrology. But to keep it plain and simple, Gaynor's South Node is in Scorpio and it's next to, also known as conjunct Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, and both of these things, Scorpio and Chiron, connected to the South Node, say to me that Gaynor probably had quite a lot of trauma that she had to heal from the past lives, and that she's brought in healing gifts from going through that the last time, and that's helped her to heal other people. That's the main sort of thing I get from that. And it's in her second house, so that's really to do with money and finances. So I don't know if there's any other things in her past life. Maybe she came from money, maybe she was quite financially secure, but there's definitely a big impact on healing within Gaynor's past life.
Yes, because when I was in the past life, I was in a manor house. I was in a big manor house. I'm not saying they was a very rich family, but I wasn't. I was, but I wasn't. I lived in it, but I wasn't. But I come from that. I can't really tell you because it's in the book, and my lips have to be sealed. But yes, I think that's dead right. And as for coming in, I came in with quite traumatized because my mother lost so many babies when I was younger.
On that note, which is a bit of a sour note, but unfortunately we live and we do pass away, and that subject can sometimes be hard, or it's a little bit, you know, it's something that again is quite taboo to talk about, but we are going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about an experience that I had that was related to a passing of a being. And also my mum would like to sort of like give her experience of what happened with my own grandmother and how she foresaw her future. Rather than it being past life, she was able to see her future. And again, I'm going to now hand that over to Gaynor to just tell that story of my grandmother's passing.
My mother was really psychic, and she was a future person, as I am a future person. But what happened was when she was dying, and we're going back a good few years now, she was in Sidcup Hospital actually, and I was over there and I was sitting on the chair, and she was really coming to the point where it was time for her to go. The doctor said she would go into some sort of coma and die within a couple of days or so. Anyway, this particular time, I'm sitting in the chair and I'm laying back, and my mother had been for 2 days in this coma. All of a sudden, I'm nearly falling asleep, and she sits bolt upright in bed and went to me, "Whose funeral have you been to?" I said, "I haven't been to a funeral." "Don't tell lies, you've been to a funeral." I said, "I haven't been to a funeral." She went on and she said, "You was crying over the flowers. You was crying over that. I know that you've been to a funeral." Full stop. She dies. Comes to her funeral. And when the cars come in, there was loads and loads of flowers, and they all had to be put inside the cars. And I was crying. I was so heartbroken because all these flowers were squashed in and put in. She had been to her own funeral. Now, over the years, I've always said past, present, and future are one. Everything is entwined. There's nothing separate. It is one. And that proved to me that she'd left, come back, she'd been to her own funeral. That's in the book too, by the way.
like going on from that, you know, we all sort of like sense things, and you know, not everybody is able to express it, but through my lifetime I've always been able to see parts of people's future as well as my own. But what I say about that is the universe, the God, the pure essence, the love essence, whatever that is out there, you are really only allowed what they enable you to see and what they think is most relevant. Many times I've crossed people's paths will tell me what's happening, what's going to be going on. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. But as we go on through the series, we'll express a little bit how we work and how that happens for us and how that may happen for you too. But one of the things that I've always wanted to do in my life was to visit Auschwitz. And as a child, I was very sort of like platonic. Is that what you call it, Josie? I loved a horror movie, anything that's dark and dreary. And you know, even now, you know, I really do like a good thriller or a true life atrocity or a true life adversity of people coming over, all sorts of things.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, and one of the intrigues that I've had was to visit Auschwitz, and that happened for me last year. But with inside myself, that you know when you know, I knew that if I was to visit Poland, I just knew that I would have an experience entering that country. It wasn't something I banged on about. I just knew I was meant to go. When I went there, I did have an essence of, right, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? But I always want to say to people, when we think about, or when we say we've seen a ghost or we've had an experience, it's not like solid form or like us now. There's a subtlety about it, or that from my experience, that's how I see it. It may be very different for other people, but that's why we're putting this forum out, because if you see it differently, bring that on, tell us your story, questioning us in any way, and we will try and articulate from different perspectives how we experience things. Well, I went to Auschwitz, and I'm not going to drain on about the story. I'm just sort of going to get to the key points. But I really thought that when I got to Auschwitz, it would be there. So on the morning, we got into a mixed vehicle. When I say mixed vehicle, it was a van with other couples in. And we started the journey towards Auschwitz. While I was in the car, the person that I was with was experiencing some physical pain, and it was in their hand. And I just said, oh, give me your hand and I'll do some healing on you. I'll use some Reiki. And I put my hand on his hand, and I sort of like went into a bit of daydreaming. And we was going past the roadside, and there was lots of grass, and it wasn't like fields, it was just sort of like on the edge of the road. And as I was looking, all of a sudden it was like the coldest of winds went up around my body, inside my chest, as if it was like an iceberg coming in. And I knew instinctively that I had spirit with me. And I knew it was a little boy, and he told me he was 5 years old. And I'm having this conversation in my head, but I literally, it was like I wanted to go, oh, who's here with me? But I've got other people in the van. I've got this human being next to me that I'm trying to do some healing on. But that was quite interlinked with this experience. But I felt so emotional, and I could see this little boy, and I could see that he was walking along the roadside, and he was showing me the pictures, like maybe what you got, Mum got. It's like, it's just projection. It's like I saw these pictures, and he said to me, he went, my name is Siegfried. Well, I don't know Polish, German names. It was that clear. And even at that point, it was happening to me. Had I had someone like my mum or someone with me that knew me, I would have been going, let's go with this, let's go with this. I mean, having an experience. But in the end, it was so overwhelming. The person that I was with, I literally went, get your phone. Don't discount me. I'm having an experience. I've got a little boy with me, and he's telling me that he was left whoever was with him holding his hand, whether that was me or not, and that's what I perceive, that's what I feel, that he was with me. I wasn't his mother, I wasn't his sister, but I was a guardian in some way, and I was holding his hand along that wayside, and the Germans come along and they took him, and that was it. And he said he died at 5 years old. Well, I done some research on Google and the internet, and there is some evidence of young people at 5 years old with that name, Siegfried, and I never knew it was Polish. I really didn't. And you know, you can count me or discount me, but that experience happened to me, and it was so overwhelming. And that for me was maybe like a past life experience, but within a consciousness of me being awake in this life. It was more to do with feelings than getting pictures. That went with me right into Auschwitz, and I could still feel him with me when he was there. But as we was going through Auschwitz, I used prayer and I used spirit to give that entity or that energy some peace. But one of the things I will leave you with is it is a humbling experience. It is something that you can't really explain unless you've been there. And if you've been there, it'd be interesting to see what you felt or what you may have experienced. But for me, it was Birkenau that was horrendous. And it's just surreal. It's just a surreal experience. But I'm so grateful that I went there. I loved Poland. I love the Polish. I really love the country. I'm not saying it's, they suffer quite a lot, but they were very humbling. They were very lovely to be around. And that whole experience was very, very interesting to me. And I think that that's sort of like my only run with past lives. I don't know. What's your feedback on that, Josie? Because you said that you looked at my chart.
I mean, for one, astrology aside, that I've heard that story before, but that was just like such a moving story. Like that was really making me emotional.
It made me very emotional. At the time, it was a bit overwhelming, but I had that experience. That happened to me, and I feel it now, even talking to you. I feel that spirit, and that spirit needed releasing. I mean, there was millions. I don't know how to explain that, but that was just something that happened for me.
Shall I just say something? That experience or many other experiences that you have, it goes to your heart, and then you feel it. I've had many experiences, not from where you've been, but through spirit, and it does. Sometimes you can actually cry because it's overwhelming to you, overwhelming feeling. It's the eye inside and part of the whole, and then you become sad because you can feel it from that person or whoever.
It was a really, and I always expected it actually to be like in the building or somewhere in Auschwitz, but it actually took place on the journey. And it was, I'm quite pleased in a way, because I was expecting at that point, although I had a no, I know, then you come in with your logical brain and then you start to expect. But then when I started the healing on the person that I was with, I suppose the more intricate this story become for me was the person I was with, and this also happened and is very true, was suffering with a condition. I don't know the name of it, but it was a condition, and it was in their hand. And I believe that person I was with was also this little boy. So I was the person that abandoned him.
Yes. Yeah.
I had his hand in the car. That past life energy then was happening at the same time as the point that we was driving past. I now am having the experience and still telling him, but keeping hold of his hand. Then from that journey, and this is the truth, from that journey, when we come back from Auschwitz, he hasn't had that problem in his hand since.
Oh my
God. Was that attract emotion? You know, your body speaks your mind, or your mind speaks your body. I'm really into that, and that's another subject for another day on health matters and how our body can trap trauma. But that to me was trapped trauma from a past life, and I was with him having a journey and had to release that pain. And I'm hoping that actually has changed maybe his and my life.
Do you feel like that was a conclusion to that whole experience then? Like, do you, like, from that
I
life?
do now, yeah, because from that experience, something has happened a little bit like this weaving of fabric, this whole thing about the spider web, or the matrix, or however way you want to express it. Everything is interconnected, and a little bit like what Mum was saying, the past, present, and future doesn't go anywhere. It's just out there. A bit like the Dalai Lama, and or Buddha. Buddha comes back. He keeps coming back through another body, and it's always with the story from the past life comes in through the child in the next life, and so on. So I really believe part of that story has come into this life, and yeah, I do think that has had an essence in closure for this life.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
lovely.
and I'm just going to sort of like throw something else in here, and I know that we were talking earlier about books, and we didn't finish the previous episode on other books about past life, and I know that you had a few, Josie, that you wanted to talk about. You did say one of them, but
Yeah.
Mum, you've also got you talked about a book that you knew on past life, or a person that expressed their past life experience. Because again, you know, it's all right listening to us, but there's so many other stories out there that you can connect into that have had a similar experience that you can tap into in the social media in some way. So Josie, what was that other book that you was talking about?
So I didn't mention a book specifically, but it was a whole range of books by a lady called Dolores Cannon. She actually passed away in 2012, but all of her books, pretty much as far as I know, they're all the transcripts of her past life regressions she done with people. That was her job. And there's tons of ones out there. There's ones to do with sort of religious figures, which I won't go out to, but Jesus, things like that. There's also ones about the ETs and aliens, and I think that was quite her speciality. And there was also just general ones. I think the one that I read was called Legacy from the Stars, and that was really good. And that was about like lifetimes from other planets, and some of the stories in there were about people being warned about this lifetime and life on Earth from those other lives. So yeah, that was really interesting, and some were future as well. It wasn't just past life.
But I don't read. I was dyslexic. I'm not a reader. I don't read. I've had bookshops. I've had metaphysical shops. But the best thing that you could ever do is go onto Amazon or somewhere like that on past lives. You'll see the most popular ones come up. Yeah, I can't remember the ones that I had, and I'm too old for that, love. I can't remember that, but there is many books on that, and on every subject. So if there's a subject that you like and you like reading, fine. I've written a book, but this has been the biggest challenge of my life. 6 years it's taken me, but never mind.
The reason I want to talk about books as well is this is going to be something that, I mean, I've read lots of books, so's Josie. They are something that's very, very much in the fabric of my life, Josie's life. But there's no way that most of the time when I read something, I'm having an experience either alongside it, or I've had the experience, and then I'm reading my own experience through somebody else's experience, which is fantastic. One lady that I have put out on the group, the private Facebook group, is Caroline Miss, and Josie's talked about the astrology and how that ties into past life and then comes into this life. She's also talked about how the future can come into this life, and I've talked about the future. I've also listened to Mum, or we've listened to her expressing about how that's fabricked into her whole life right up to now, sort of writing her book. But she talks, this lady, about contracts, and it's called the sacred contract. And it's again a little bit along everything that we've spoken about, and how before we come down to the earth, what we are come here to do and what our purpose is. And I know that so many of us out there sometimes have no idea what our purpose is. And I would imagine there's lots of you that ask that question within yourself, out to the world, express it to people.
Or what we need to learn from this life.
That's it, and what we need to learn from this life. But if you
Mm-hmm.
have any questions, if you want to put forward your story, we've got our email. Subscribe to us. Please contact us through our website. We would love to hear from you. If you want to be a guest and you want to bring your story to us, we would love to hear from you. I'll hand this over the end to Josie, just in case you've got something else you might like to add into the end of this podcast. But I'm hoping that you're enjoying it so far. Please give us your feedback. Stay nice.
Well, I know I've enjoyed the stories from both of you, and it's lovely to hear your experiences. But I guess the last thing I'll say regarding astrology and past lives is that I just had an insight while you were talking about your own experience. And I was just thinking about how, so in astrology, you have aspects, and that's basically just how a planet is, or point in the chart is connecting to another planet or point in the chart. And looking at yours, Nicola, I'm thinking your South Node, which is in Virgo, the sign of health, medical, healing. So I do think with you being in the medical industry, you have done that in past lives and have brought that forward, especially with it being in the 10th house of profession as well. But I do feel that if it's making connections or aspects to different planets, maybe that's showing us as well how our current life is affected by our past life, because some stuff is new and fresh, of course, and like we develop habits in this lifetime, but I think a lot of other things do carry over from like our past programming and what we come in with. So look at your birth charts, people, and have a little look yourself.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and it's triggered the general public, and we're really grateful because we've had some stories come in, and we've got 3 we want to share with you. I have a story from Samantha. Thank you, Samantha, for this. Samantha was part of Sacred Stars, which my mum created down in Paynton, a group where they sat circle, and one week Samantha was doing past life regression. What's really interesting is how she remembers the year and to the point, and it was 1553. And what happened to her, she was hung for being a witch, and she was totally aware of the religious world that she was in her regression. She was a Protestant and she was in a Catholic world. But what was really interesting was how she related that to her current life, how she really does feel like she has had some kind of energy around her neck because she was hung. And in this life, she's experiencing that phobia or not liking anything around her neck. So that's quite interesting. So thank you, Samantha. Yeah, very interesting. I would also be keen to know whether you've actually explored 1553, because I would then start reading the history all around that. I would be really reading into it, because you may trigger more memories and find some more clues to maybe what happened and what went on more in your past life. Over to you, Josie. You've got another good one here.
This is a story from Claire. So when Claire was a child, she would always talk about her past life to her family, or as she called it, her last life, saying, no, not this time. Last time when I lived with my granny. She went on about it, describing the house in every detail, even where her window was at the side of the house, which I think quite a lot of people, including Gaynor, have those experiences of remembering a property, and that can become triggered. And this is where her story continues. She says, one Sunday afternoon, they all went for a lovely little drive to a village near her called Ashmore. And she got really excited and started screaming, there, look, it's my house. And it was exactly as I had described. Her family were in shock. She's been back as an adult, but nothing. And she actually went back there very recently, a few days ago. And she said the pull in her solar plexus made her feel sick. She said she had seen the place it was like she had seen the place in a film, very familiar, but she couldn't remember any life there. And she also sent a picture of this house. And as you can actually see in the picture, maybe we'll post it on the Facebook groups. We did have her permission. It's very old. It's got like a, would you say it's a thatched roof, Nicola? I
Oh,
think
yeah.
yeah, it looks very old. So what I said to her, I'm waiting for a follow-up, but I asked her if she'd actually looked at the history of the house, because she might be able to see the families that lived there, if that's on record.
I can
Yeah.
tell you a story. I can tell you another story about that too.
Mm.
There is many people that have had the same sort of thing. My cousin, when her son was born, he could tell her everything what happened when she was having him, how many doctors was there, what was happening, everything. And he also, when he come to 2 or 3, kept crying and kept saying, "You're not my mum. You're not my mum. I've got another mum." And that kept on. Generally, it goes up until about 7. Then the child is out the mother's aura at that time. But he can still remember stuff. So yeah, that is really. There's lots and lots of stories like that, because I've encountered lots of people that have had them stories.
Well, I mean, all I can say is when I was younger, I used to go and stay with my nan, my dad's mum, and I had this vision of me and her being in a field. Well, not a sad field, it was like a wood, and then there was this opening, like you get a south face of sun and an opening and a green, and we was in beautiful white dresses, but I knew that it wasn't this century. It was I'd say 18th century or early 18th century. I wouldn't say it was late, I'd say it was early, and the sun was absolutely shining, and I had blonde hair. I was probably about 14 and she was 12, or vice versa. We was around those ages, and I just can see it even now in my head, but it was like a blueprint. And it just come to me when I was sitting just with my nan, and that memory came back to me, well, just this week, because we've been talking about past lives. But you get so caught up in your daily life, and you get so caught up in I've had so many experiences that you just don't all you have to get that trigger sometimes to remember.
Yeah.
Come on then, Gaynor. Debbie, you've got the story of a lady that you met in the shop years ago, and you are part of this experience.
Yeah, Debbie, I can't remember, obviously, it goes back a good few years, but there's every now and again, I do get a past life up. I can't prove it, but you've just, unless someone comes along and says, "Well, you've said this, Gaynor," and they give me the proof. Well, Debbie, I like the fact that you've said that I said that your daughter was your mother in a past life, and I said that she'd be very creative and she'd be a teacher because she's very bossy, I dare say she must have been. Anyway, and I like the response of what you said. Yes, she did. She become a teacher. She was very creative, and she's still bossing you about. I love that. So yeah, she's still your mum. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because it actually relates to your story, Nicola, of like family members that you have now being different family members in a past life.
So again, thank you for joining 111 Life. We want you to join, subscribe, and stay tuned. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Catch it, put it in a jar to have and to hold. To save for later, you cannot trust it to come again. To wait for you to find a pen and fill the paper with the message that